Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 2020 Dean's Honor Symposium, Eugene Lang College, New School University. I guess just to state the obvious, this symposium is completely unlike anything any of us anticipated looking like. But in many ways, I think it underscores just how incredible and how smart and creative and innovative the students at Eugene Lang College are. The last couple of weeks for all of us, especially those in the New York City community, have been incredibly challenging, unprecedented in just about every aspect of our lives. And we find ourselves connecting with each other, continuing our work, staying engaged with ideas in ways that I don't think any of us could have imagined just a few weeks ago. And I feel incredibly lucky and privileged to have had the chance to work with these students over the last couple of months to be a part of today's presentation. I really can't take much credit for what they'll be presenting today. In some ways, I was just a sounding board and providing a little bit of feedback. But really, they've all taught me so much about what it means to be an undergraduate student right now at this moment. Within this city and as a part of this institution. And so just to say a few quick words about today's theme, one of the things that was so interesting that I was sort of asked to do is to think about how all of these intellectually and personally diverse stories and topics come together. And one of the things that just seems to be coming up again and again is this idea of home. And what does home and place mean? And personally, that's something that has always been a part of my research. As a clinical psychologist, I spend a lot of time thinking about how people construct identities and the ways in which they reflect on how different aspects of their lives and where they've come from physically and representationally shape how people understand the ways around them. But I do that in a particular way with the ways psychologists tend to study those ideas. And what I thought was amazing was just the way that this group of students took some of those notions and completely re-examined them. By the tools, by the intellectual frameworks, by the methodologies, by the technologies, and in many ways, their own autobiographies. They really brought all of this to the table as a way to think about what does home mean? How does home shape the way I think about my work? And then I think even maybe most importantly, how does my work then provide a lens for the way I think about places and places that we've all come from? And what I'm sure you will experience today, by the end of this, is not only an appreciation of just the creativity and the intellectual rigor that they brought to this work, but really a profound depth of understanding for how we can situate ourselves within different contexts, within the familiar, with the unfamiliar, and to really use that as a basis to convey to others where we come from, where we might be going, and how we can use this research to be engaged individuals, to be engaged citizens, and for us to think about ways we can build community, especially at moments like this, when more than ever, I think we need to find ways of understanding our histories, our moments, and our futures. I don't want to spend too much more time talking because the real stars of today's presentations are the students that you see in front of you. I just want to thank, again, the Dean's Office and Jennifer for reaching out to me to be a part of this program. I'm so proud to be affiliated with Eugene Lang College and everyone associated with it. This is a very special day. I just want to make sure that we mark that and take that moment, this moment right now, to recognize all of the hard work that these students have done and the fact that they've found ways to communicate with you remotely. And just to thank, the students again for bringing me into their work, sharing it with me, working so hard on getting their presentations ready. And I'm just thrilled to have the opportunity, like all of you, to get to see the final product. So with that, I'm going to pass it over. Each student will present, and I think we will have time at the end for questions. So with that, thanks to all of you. Oliver, I'll turn it over to you.
Welcome and thank you for attending the 2020 Dean's Honor Symposium. My name is Oliver Dillon, and I'm a junior here at the New School, majoring in both architecture and urban studies. For my presentation today, I will focus on a project I proposed a year ago for an urban transportation course. Sorry, it's not working. I'll be right back.
We expected there might be some minor technical glitches, so we appreciate everyone's patience and understanding in meeting us where we are at the moment. But I'm sure we'll get this working in no time. So just give us 1 second to figure this out. And Oliver, if for whatever reason you'd like us to come back to you and have someone else start, if that feels easier, we can also do that.
Nope, it's ready to go.
Perfect.
Alrighty. So the proposal is for the creation of a special district encompassing the entire functional region of New York City. The region covers 4,500 square miles, has a population of 20 million, a GDP of 1.78 trillion US dollars, and a density of 4,500 per square mile. It is composed of 4 distinct urban typologies: the city, town, suburb, and country. In my research, I looked at what these typologies share, and what I found was a common thread, and that was municipal infrastructure. It is literally everywhere and fits into every facet of daily life throughout the region. It is composed of a particular set of infrastructures that work together, creating wealth and enriching people's lives. However, it brings a myriad of political and social issues as well. Examples are transit, which carries over 20% of the region's commuters, highways, which carry 65% of commuters, even though it is in decline, a massive water system stretching from the Catskills to Cape May, and numerous power plants ranging from coal to tidal barrage, as well as an overcapacity waste system. But what are the challenges facing this system? And what are the challenges facing the region? There's political infighting, most particularly between city and state, which has become the ultimate reason why these systems tend to fail. There's also decreasing efficiency across most systems, the threat of climate change and generational pollution, faulting infrastructure and disrepair, rapidly expanding poverty and homelessness, unchained growth, which has led to overcrowding and gentrification, surging commuter populations expected to reach 30 to 35% in the coming decade, an increase of 10%. And as well as the long-lasting effects of deindustrialization, particularly on the periphery. In my research, I looked at what a silver bullet solution could be, if any. And what I proposed was a New York special district. The district would be built on 6 key elements: voting, taxation, an emphasis on the Green New Deal, equality, sensible growth, and the cutting back of bureaucracy. So what is a special district? Examples are the Hamburg state, a federal state in Germany, which is a free city and operates its own municipal infrastructure. The Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, just in our backyard, which manages trains, tunnels, bridges, ports, and airports. As well as another and more exact special district, which is the Utah Water Plan, which operates most of the state's water, even though water tends to be a city issue here in the United States. So next I'm going to look at building the district. First, we start out with a voting system. The voting system is based on a 1-to-4 power ratio based on the number of active authorities within the district. The same goes for a tax system ranging from 2 to 4% based on income, which would be on a progressive scale. And this money would be used to fund all the projects and the creation of the very authorities used within this region. For an example, you have the Transit Authority, which would use assets from the MTA, New Jersey Transit Path, as well as manage assets from Amtrak, New Jersey DOT, and Connecticut DOT to form an authority which would oversee transit, roads, and aviation. A similar district authority would be a power utility company, a public utility, which would enter into a joint stock ownership with the Jersey Central Power and Light, Con Ed, and LIPA to create a single public utility shared by all. Similarly, you have a water system, which mirrors the same structure as the transit system, which would take over assets from all states within the region and manage their water systems. Another and more farther down the line project would be a public housing authority, which would use funds generated within the region to fund housing projects within the most dense and poor communities within the region. A waste system mirroring that of the water system would take over assets and manage waste more responsibly and keep it within the region rather than exporting it. And finally, we have an economic region. This would allow for public investment in public projects through economic development corporations in the form of community grants, capital investment, and trade. So finally, we have to look at what these projects could do. You have projects that would be possible, such as the Crossrail, similar to that in London, which could link the region's transit systems together. You'd have the creation of more equitable communities through the creation of public resources, such as the public utility and public housing, a green infrastructure built through the Energy Authority, and overall economic growth that would improve people's lives through sustainability and overall equitable growth. Looking forward, there are many suitable initiatives for the problems facing the region. Building a municipal district may just be one piece in a much larger puzzle. I want to thank the New School and Eugene Lang for this opportunity. Thank you. We will have questions after. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Oliver. Grace, I believe you're next.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Grace Tarducci, and I want to start off by just really thanking everyone for tuning in. I know we all have a lot on our plates right now with the global pandemic, and I'm sure I speak for everyone when I say I'm so grateful to you for attending this symposium. To start off my time, I'd like to share a clip from my documentary, Plop City, a project which examines the disruption Hudson Yards has created in New York City through gerrymandering, unethical displacement, poor union negotiations, and so much more in the name of art and culture. This clip specifically documents a phone call between me and my mother, Mia Tarducci, a Pittsburgh artist who was commissioned to make a painting for the personal collection of the head of related companies, the company that commissioned Hudson Yards, Stephen Ross. Hi, Mom.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good. What's up?
So I'm making this documentary about Hudson Yards.
Okay.
And I wanted to know if I could interview you. Kind of reminds me of
Is it going to be negative, honey?
It's for class. It's not going to go anywhere.
I just can't, because if it were to get out in any way, shape, or
Because
form,
of the
I'd be
side?
fucked.
Okay. Like that?
I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
Because she's doing a whole bunch of shit ton of things for me.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't want to, bite the hand that feeds me.
Right, yeah, I got you. That's kind of what it's about. So that's...
I figured.
Yeah.
Because I love you.
Yeah.
And I love you.
I love you too.
It's National Siblings Day.
Oh, I should text my siblings. My
You should
soybeans.
text your siblings, yeah. Give them your love and undying affection.
All right, I'll do that.
right, I'll talk to you later, honey.
All right, love you. Bye.
Love you too. Bye.
Oh, shit. So, okay, that's not happening. This is what I mean, though. Like, last year, I began drafting a documentary project about the role of contemporary artists, inspired by the commission my mom had done for Stephen Ross and by Martha Rossler's book, Culture Class, from which I took this quote. We were talking about whether choosing to be an artist means aspiring to serve the rich. That seems to be the dominating economic model for artists in our country. The most visible artists are very good at serving the rich. What began as a personal project aimed at exploring my mom's opinions on what it means to be reliant on capitalists and elite collectors who may be idealistically opposed to the lifestyle and belief system of a career artist, single mother of four, quickly became a deep dive into the morally shady funding and creation of the mega project Hudson Yards. Over the course of a semester, I did independent research and filming to expose dramatic realities of the most expensive real estate project in US history. Hudson Yards is a self-sustaining capitalist utopia. It contains workspace, living space, a shopping mall, restaurants, schools, parks, art, and its own medical facilities, which offer at-home calls at one of the highest price points in New York City. When taxed with explaining the positive effects Hudson Yards will have on New York, both Stephen Ross, the founder of Related Companies, and Related CEO Jeff Blau focus on the cultural impact it will have on the city. But isn't culture supposed to positively impact the communities and majority people of New York, rather than just the economy and the 1%?
New York City's a union town. Open shop is going down. Open shop is going down. Count me in, 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 count me in.
So Thursday evening, 5 o'clock, Related was planning a party to celebrate the grand opening of a building that's not even complete yet. And right behind me is a bunch of rank and file members who have made concessions to build their first phase of the Hudson Yards 100% union, and we're willing to cut their wages and cut their benefits and change working rules just so they can work with that developer. And the way he says thank you is by building non-union. So they're out here letting him know, shame on you, Steve Ross. Listen.
If you got the rope, everybody has the rope? All right, on the count of three, you're going to pull it. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Yesterday we had our opening event. I got here, the party started at 6. I got here at 4:30. There must have been 100 workers still in the plaza. But we did it, we made it happen, and we are officially open. And I think this is going to be the greatest addition to New York City in history.
Any concern about just the state of the retail market right now? Opening a big mall. I know you said it's not just a mall,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, of course you always have concern. But what we've done, I kind of call this future proofing. In other words, if you can think of every possible way you can get people excited about coming off the devices and coming out of your home and actually going through an experience of walking into a department store and going into retail. I mean, the vessel, the shed in terms of cultural facilities, the High Line. I mean, just look at all the things we have here, the observation deck, over 25 restaurants in the project at every single price point and every design point. So if you can't get excited about coming into this project, you're not going to go anywhere outside here. You're going to spend your whole life on a device.
Related Companies cleverly distracts the public from their poor negotiations with union workers, the direct and non-direct displacement of communities and community projects, their controversial method of funding with a visa program intended to aid impoverished communities, and their exclusive access to at-home medical attention. Here is an excerpt from a public record I found in my research regarding the zoning of the new subway line, the 7 train, created for Hudson Yards. The document states, the proposed action could also result in the displacement of an institutional building, the Icon House Tier 2 shelter, which provides temporary shelter for 290 residents. Although the project was found to potentially displace an entire homeless shelter and roughly 290 residents, it was approved because it was deemed uncertain whether or not the shelter would remain open for the next 20 years. In order to fund the mega project, Hudson Yards developers used a visa program for foreign investors known as the EB-5 visa program. The program was created to allow investors to give $500,000 to $900,000, although their website today says $900,000, so the minimum may have been updated since I did my research, to fund real estate projects in low-income areas in the United States, such as small rural areas and distressed urban areas. Although the actual location of Hudson Yards, Midtown Manhattan, does not qualify as a distressed urban area, Related Companies was able to secure this funding through creative gerrymandering, including Harlem in the plans for Hudson Yards. The clip I am about to play includes both dialogue from a City Lab article by Kristen Capps and my own research.
This particular TEA snakes up from the west side and includes Central Park. Yes, it is a map of Manhattan that claims Central Park as an economically troubled area. Beyond the park, the qualifying zone for Hudson Yards captures several census tracts in Harlem, where public housing projects boost the overall unemployment figure. Related sopped up hundreds of millions in funds never intended to finance luxury projects. The developer has successfully leveraged Harlem unemployment to raise more in EB-5 financing than any other developer in the nation. Related solicited investments from some 3,200 foreign visa seekers. This figure is significant, since the number of new visas that the U.S. issues each year under EB-5 has a hard cap of 10,000. Given that each eligible investor may claim visas for immediate family members, and since these family visas, an average of 3, also count towards the overall cap, the Hudson Yards development may have easily claimed an entire year's worth of visas issued under EB-5. Street View.
Artists have a certain responsibility to their communities, but historically, the invocation of artistic movements has often led to the displacement of entire communities within New York City. Such was the case with the Soho artists of the 1960s and 70s, and is the case today with what theorist Richard Florida and artist Martha Rossler refer to as the culture class. Culture class refers to the educated working class informed by lifestyle politics. In other words, people who identify with an aesthetic movement that is somehow linked to political or socioeconomic views. Examples of this are hippies, punks, goths, and most recently hipsters. While these movements seek to unify artistic communities and incite political action, they also exclude anyone who cannot afford a lifestyle that has been aestheticized by their political agendas. The aesthetics of a lifestyle go beyond clothing choices. The culture class strives to build entire creative communities for itself, consequentially erasing pre-existing ones. My theory is that big developers have caught on to the trend of culture as an excuse for gentrification. The real estate mega project, Hudson Yards, surrounds itself with a cultural shield comprised of the Whitney Museum of American Art and the Highline Art Collection. Hudson Yards takes this a step further by creating its own art, the vessel, while simultaneously sucking money and culture out of New York and New York's low-income communities. After receiving critique on this project from Martha Rossler and meeting with the associate curator of the Highline Art Collection, I have decided there is still more to be done with my project. I am continuing my research and digging deeper into what related companies owes to the city, specifically Harlem, and what they owe to the general public spatially. I'd like to thank Professor Alan Ruiz for his theory of spatial alchemy and his guidance through Lang's Art and the Global City class, and for encouraging me to further my research on this project and send it along to Rossler, whose writings inspired the project. I'd also like to thank my mom for not suing me, even though she totally could have.
Related Companies is hiding behind a guise of art and culture to distract you from their mistreatment of union workers, their unwillingness to hire union workers, to distract you from the man who was hospitalized after falling from the construction site of 30 Hudson Yards during work, to distract you from the possible displacement of a homeless shelter, to distract you from their exploitation of Harlem for capital gain, to distract you from the medical elitist favoritism, to distract you from the fact that this is really just a mall designed to make us feel elite and cultured and comfortable by promoting fake liberal agendas to make a future-proof plop city. And what is future-proofing? Just a way to keep a steady income for as long as we go to see the art of Hudson Yards? 78 years young. What's future-proofing to you when you're not a part of our future? Success Academy at Hudson Yards was opened in 2017. Their elementary school currently educates children from kindergarten to second grade, though they plan on expanding to fourth. Their middle school program currently runs from 5th to 7th grade, though they plan on expanding to 8th. Shh.
Shh. It's oh so quiet. Shh. Shh.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Grace. Next is Emily, and I just want to say as Emily gets her slides up, for the folks who are tuning in today, you're seeing, the transformation of all of their work into this presentation. Everyone had the raw materials coming in, but I can just say, as someone who's been a part of this process, the evolution from when I met them to what you're seeing today has been really profound, and the polished work you're seeing is really the efforts of all of their hard work. Emily, take it away.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed faculty and colleagues. Let's keep talking about our shared home of New York City. Some of us here have probably lived in Bushwick, Brooklyn. Most of us have at least visited Bushwick. In the fall of 2018, I had been living in Bushwick for 3 months. I was a new privileged tenant living off of Flushing Avenue, and I was also a student in a journalism and design course called News, Narrative, and Design 2, in which we write 3 pieces based on our chosen beat or theme. My beat was gentrification in Bushwick. When we think of Bushwick, we think quirky bars, colorful graffiti murals, vegan food, students, wealthier students in residence, and warehouses. We don't tend to think of warm Mexican sweetbread, shiny golden nativity sets, and blessed candles and incense from local botanicas, unless you're a part of this community, of course, or have paid closer attention to this historic neighborhood. The Latinx community has called Bushwick their home for decades, and with the ongoing high tide of gentrification, their values, traditions, businesses, and culture are being overshadowed by rising rents, abusive landlords, and hipsters. Bushwick's Hispanic population, as of 2019, is 55.4% compared to the white population at 22.5%. Bushwick makes up 65% of Brooklyn's Latinx population. I'd see colorful flags from all over South America and the Caribbean hanging off of apartment windows and hung onto business windows as I walked home every day after getting off of the M train. On some evenings, I'd hear singing from my window, and I'd look down onto the sidewalk to see a group of Catholics holding candles and flowers and singing hymns for Lady Guadalupe. It reminded me of my home of South Florida, growing up in my Cuban American community, one that has struggled for so long to share their stories, as well as being surrounded by friends and business owners from all over the Caribbean and South America. As I watched my new community proudly existing amongst the hipster warehouse bars and clubs down the street, I felt their stories were being overshadowed and wondered how these few blocks were coping with gentrification. As a former resident of Bushwick and a student journalist, I wanted to do my best to tell pieces of the ongoing story of the community I lived in as I watched it rapidly change. In the fall of 2018, when I was working on this piece, the New York general election was rampant. We had no idea if Andrew Cuomo would continue to govern our state or how our leadership would change. In September of 2018, Bushwick's local community released the Bushwick Community Plan, a method of action to prevent rent increase and stabilize zoning that had been worked on since 2014. The Coalition for Hispanic Family Services had also been in place since 1990, which provides local support services such as foster care, abuse programs, mental health services, art and literature services, and community meetings. On top of this, coffee shops and restaurants make up 7.2% of major employee sectors in the area. With this in mind, I approached every shop owner and employee with questions not on their defeats alone, but their methods of maintaining business in these hard times. What I learned from these Latinx-owned businesses is that they all carry the spirit of hope, change, pride, and endurance. At Guadalupana Bakery on Ellery Street, Evelyn Rojas told me the story of her father coming from Mexico and opening a traditional bakery using recipes from their home of Pueblo. My dad is an immigrant and came here with nothing, said Rojas. He knows that people suffer. I tell him he's not a good businessman. He loves his work and he's good at not taking advantage of people. As long as he can take 2 vacations a year, he's okay with the prices. They sell each pastry for $1 to $1.50, preserving their familial traditions while showcasing their faith in Lady Guadalupe. So this is actually the menu in their shop. Recently, Rojas stood behind the counter and adjusted her white apron. My grandfather was a famous baker in our town, she said. Anyone there knows his name. Rojas explained that the red bread made in the bakery is tied to Puebla. When I was little and came to the city of Puebla, she said, I saw cream pastries and was like, wow, cream-filled pastries are more expensive and only in the city, not the outskirts where we're from. So this is actually the bread, and if you're ever in the area in Bushwick on Ellery Street, I highly recommend you try it. It's so good, so sweet, so delicious. And then these are the decorations that they had up in the shop of Lady Guadalupe. Branches of faith are displayed strongly in this neighborhood. At La Botanica Jose, Carmen Martinez, the shop owner, told me all about the community's faith and how many people come into her shop to pray to her altars. People come just to pray at our Jesus altar, Martinez said. I'm not the type to pray. I just feel the energy. You can't just light a candle. You have to feel the presence, she said, tapping her glitter-painted nails on a candle of St. Michael. So this is the altar that people would come and give their donations to, which I thought was like really beautiful. And then this is the sign that was outside of her shop, which I just thought was so poignant and so personal. I love that it said ask for Carmen and it just listed all of these different services. It's just like right outside her shop and it completely drew me in, especially since I was looking for like smaller local businesses. So just ask for Carmen completely drew me in. Oops. Spirituality was an ethereal presence in every business I visited. A few blocks down, Enrique's Salon celebrates spiritual faith and love in shimmering color. Inside on this particular day, hairstylist Maritza Angeles played with coworker Vanessa Solis' tresses. A large-scale nativity set sat at the front of the salon. The owner, Enrique, was on his winter vacation, Angeles said. He is a Catholic and brings that inspiration into the salon, she explained. So this is the giant nativity set that's at the front of the shop, which again, like completely drew me in. This place was bursting with color. The music was loud. People were getting their hair cut. It was just a really cool, homey scene. And the people there were incredible. All of the people I met were incredible. But this is Vanessa's niece's quinceañera, I believe. And then this is someone getting their hair cut. And it kind of like reminded me of my home of Miami a bit, just because a lot of guys like get that haircut. So I just wanted to capture that moment. And then there's the Woodhill Family Deli, a newer Mexican-owned business on the block at the time. Poinsettias, a Mexican flower displayed during Christmas time usually, sat on each table. On one wall, there were welcoming messages written by customers in chalk. One of them read, "Community is the heart of the city." Every business I went into expressed that they had hope for their businesses and felt rooted on their blocks, embracing the community closeness and the spirit of faith. I am so happy and honored to share pieces of their stories with you. I believe we learn so much from each other, and as communities change, we must acknowledge those who have stayed rooted, proud, and strong. Since publishing this story, Bushwick has only gone further into the trenches of enormously high rents, abusive landlords, and zoning. Let's look at what all parts of home means. This is what we do, Rojas said, in keeping the neighborhood alive. This is what these businesses do, keep a neighborhood alive. I'd like to thank Professor Kia Gregory for her encouragement and incredible support, News Narrative and Design 2, the Tuesday-Thursday class of fall 2018, the Journalism and Design Department, and Lang. And this is the QR code in case anyone wants to like quickly scan it and read the rest of the piece. Otherwise, I can send a link to anybody who wants one. So thank you and be healthy.
Thank you so much, Emily. As we go to Caroline, just to mention that Emily had plans when this was going to be in person to bring you treats from all of these places. So you could not only engage with the visuals, but also every aspect of sense, smell, taste, and everything. So hopefully in the near future, we will all be able to go to Bushwick and participate and partake in these amazing places. In the meantime, we will now go over to Caroline.
Hi, everyone. My name is Caroline Willis, and I'm a dual degree student studying liberal arts at Lang with a minor in journalism and design and photography at Parsons. And my project is called God, Family, and Country. I want to begin with a quote from Flannery O'Connor, who is from my home state, who says, "Anything that comes out of the South is going to be called grotesque by the Northern reader, unless it is grotesque, in which case it is going to be called real." I was applying to colleges. My uncle jokingly told me not to move above the Mason-Dixon line, as you see here, as he knew I likely would, as someone who emphatically expressed my dislike of Southern right-leaning politics. The Mason-Dixon line is largely a symbolic division between the northern and southern regions of the eastern United States, but was officially outlined in the latter part of the 18th century as a colonial border separating Pennsylvania and Delaware from its southern neighbors, Maryland and West Virginia. As the co-founder of the Georgia-based rock band Drive-By Truckers, Patterson Hood has said, "If the Mason-Dixon line provided the cultural and political dividing line in the 19th and most of the 20th century, now the divisions are more between rural and urban, blue state and red state. The political divide is as fierce as at any time since the abolition of slavery, and both sides are becoming less inclined to compromise." Growing up in the town of Albany in rural South Georgia, in elementary through high school, I attended a school founded in resistance to integration policies. I played a game called Manhunt, which is similar to tag, in former slave quarters at a classmate's home. I heard countless stories of a woman by the name of Dorothy, the hired help, who practically raised my grandmother. In my senior year of high school, the year of the 2016 presidential election, my classmates brazenly donned the red Make America Great Again hats that have come to signify Donald Trump's base. In 2018, I watched as Stacey Abrams lost the Georgia governor's race to Brian Kemp, who then implemented anti-choice legislation that would prohibit abortions after a fetus's heartbeat could be detected. As I was increasingly melancholic of the representation and actions of my home state, I also longed for the chorus of the cicadas, the whisper of the pines, the often too humid heat that warmed my skin year-round, the South Georgia lakes, the color of red clay that cooled my body in the summer months. The familiar comfort of my mom's cheese grits, going out to the farm with my grandfather and dad to check on the deer feeders, essentially the familiar rhythms and sounds to home life. When going home, spring break of 2019, I knew I wanted to do work concerning my Southern identity, but conflicted, as Hood emphasizes, how much to sing the song of the South, especially amid genuine evidence of racial progress, and how much to be a skeptical voice in a place where issues of race and class often shadow conversations about even the most innocent pleasures. To this, he says, such is the duality of the Southern thing. Thus, rather than attempting to come to any sort of definitive conclusion, I explored this duality. I photographed the surrounding areas in my upbringing in medium format 120 film images, in addition to scanning over 200 family archival images. The pairings of family portraits and places from my grandparents' childhoods with my own images are also accompanied by interview texts from my grandparents, who are referenced by the names Mimi and Papa, which are their names their grandchildren, myself included, call them. These components of interview text, which was influenced by classes I was taking in Lang's Journalism and Design program and images taken from my Core Studio 2 photography class, eventually culminated in a 52-page book and print series. I'm not entirely sure what I think of my home. It's the place where annoyances can easily cloud the beauty, like when gnats in the summertime buzz in my ears, as sweat drips down my neck, seldom to be cooled by a warm breeze. The breeze slightly distracts from the heat, momentarily displaces the gnats, and gently waves the Spanish moss on the oak trees, so visually representative of the region. I've always loved the way the light eases in and out of the twist of the moss in the late afternoons. When I was a little girl who avidly played house and dolls, I often imagined getting married under the oaks, the same oaks that often line the driveways to plantations and have become synonymous with images of the hanging tree. This is the duality of the South. Recognition of this duality and the hatred that still permeates this landscape is important for me to recognize, to stand for a better South, and to bear witness to this complexity. Thank you, and special thanks to Professor Susan Stellan and Graham McIndoe for their support of this project. And if you would like to see my book in its entirety, it is available digitally on my website, which is accessible through the QR code you see here. Thank you again, and stay safe, everyone.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Please do make sure that you take a look at all of the photos and that you find the book and really spend time with all of the images. Thank you for the presentation. And now we are going to move to Jade.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Hope everybody can hear me, right? We're good? Rad. Awesome. Hi, my name is Jade. I am actually just graduated, and I am a journalism and design student with a minor in contemporary music. And I'm going to be talking about Southern hip hop. At the 1995 Source Awards in New York City, tensions were high. West Coast superstar Tupac Shakur was shot the previous year and was in jail at the time of the awards. Suge Knight, co-founder of Death Row Records, which Shakur was signed on to, instigated what became the peak of the Coast Wars when he poked fun at New York's P. Diddy. Fellow West Coast rapper Snoop Dogg, who won Artist of the Year, went on a rant after noticing the harsh welcome he and his fellow Californians received. All the while, Biggie Smalls and the Bad Boy Records roster continuously chanted, "Bad boy, bad boy," much to the theater's delight. The East Coast-West Coast rivalry was bubbling in that theater. And then it was announced that Atlanta's Outkast won Best New Rap Group. In the sea of boos and jeers, Andre 3000 took the mic and said, "The South got something to say." Killer Mike, fellow Atlanta native, said, "It was a great thing that it was handled in that way, because it finally cut the umbilical cord, saying, we don't have to impress you," referring to New York. "We don't have to be influenced by you in the same creative way. We just have to show you." During the mid-'80s into the '90s, hip-hop took over America and brought a new meaning to theatrics and music. And it brought the conflict between the East and West Coast, which went from what audience saw as performative fun into real-life consequences, seeing casualties of beloved figures such as Notorious B.I.G. and Tupac Shakur. In the midst of this conflict was the South, self-referred to as the Third Coast, taking an outsider role and wearing it like a badge of honor. Wait, wrong one. It keeps skipping. Sorry, everybody.
At night I can't sleep. I toss and turn. Candlesticks in the dark. Visions of bodies being burned. Four walls just staring at a nigga. I'm paranoid, sleeping with my finger on the trigger.
Taking upon influences of Southern blues and country music, the South's take on hip-hop was decidedly a lot more dark, best characterized by the Ghetto Boys' smash hit, Mind Playing Tricks on Me, which painted a terrifying portrait of guilt and paranoia as an effect of street life. The South's status as an underground allowed for much of the music art markets to be out of mainstream control. Without corporate entities looming over these artists, they had full autonomy to take risks with their sounds and release music at an astonishing rate. Their music was also intensely communal, with production and guest features often being friends who do not consider themselves musicians, neighbors with a random audio interface, as well as fellow artists. As a result, this music became a form of social currency with a fortified, interconnected network of musicians and fans trading and duplicating CDs and tapes as a means of connection beyond streets, neighborhoods, cities, and states. At the height of chopped and screwed Texas icon DJ Screw's career before his untimely death, he sold $15,000 worth of tapes every single day out of his home and his trunk. His storefront, as pictured here, is still active to this day. November 2019 marked 15 years since one of my favorite albums, Crunk Juice by Lil Jon, was released. And before I go on, here's a little taste of the song Roll Call featuring Ice Cube. Keeps doing that. So reviews of this album were polarizing, as you would expect, with the more negative ones saying things such as Lil Jon reduced rap to endless and incredibly stupid choruses of nasty talk, and almost laughably one note, devoid of nuance, stunted of vocabulary, and eons too long. But for Southern rap audiences and fans such as myself, that album was much more than that. It captured a scene, a moment, and a culture that started in Miami clubs, made its way into Atlanta strip clubs, and reverberated across the country on dance floors everywhere. I realized that Southern rap opened up a world of experimentation, innovation, and honesty. As Lance Scott Walker, author of Houston Rap Tapes, said in my interview with him, there's no gatekeepers. You can reason that there is a gatekeeper in Jay Prince from Rap-A-Lot Records, but he's known for scaring people away from Houston. There, everything is done independently. With a talent pool in Houston and no gatekeepers, interesting things are going to happen more so than if someone is there to put their hand on something and say yes or no. That sort of environment allows artists to flourish who would never had a chance elsewhere. In the midst of this bustling economy of music is female rappers who stood tall alongside their male counterparts. They often reappropriated this hypermasculine sexual language to describe their own conquests, or rapped about murders, rampages, and carjackings. Much of hip-hop scholarship has overlooked the contributions of the South as a whole, in turn leaving the work that these women have done into dusty corners. Through various grants offered by the New School, which I received, I was able to travel to Miami, Memphis, Atlanta, and Houston to do research on this music. And central to my research is the way in which female rappers, particularly those in the South, use this hypermasculine arena of hardcore and horrorcore hip-hop to reflect on their experiences in sexuality, which I argue is feminist. Now, in the arena of hip-hop, we're going to have to face it, sex sells. Particularly in the South, one of the more long-standing genres of hip-hop to emerge from this region, which has a home in strip clubs, is crunk music. Crunk music is designed for partying and dancing, and due to its context in these strip clubs of mainly Louisiana and Atlanta, they often feature lyrics that spoke to the objectification of women. One of 3 6 Mafia's most successful songs, Slob on My Knob, is a perfect example of this.
I said bend over, started to knock, then came the push, had a push, told her to stop and take a bitch. When she did that, I didn't want the cat, so I bamped out and never came back.
So in the second clip, Gangsta Boo, who was another member of 3 6 Mafia actually, asserted her sexuality and reappropriated the hook of Slob on My Knob, which she turned on its head, going back and forth with the original hook. In reappropriating the sexually aggressive language to assert her own wants and needs, what can be seen as the objectification of women in the South and its hypersexualized genres of hip-hop is merely the women using these vehicles as a form of valid expression. Now, the arena of the strip club is contested as a site of objectification for some, but in the South, strip clubs are a lot more than that. They're a meeting point for birthday parties to business meetings. And because of its purpose in Southern culture as a popular meeting place, as popular as the mall, it's become an arena of validation for music. DJs would play up-and-coming artists and songs in strip clubs as a testing site for larger success in other clubs and radio airwaves. These female-populated spaces in turn validate music made by men, in which the women are now the gatekeepers of culture. So the experiences of these women I interviewed varied widely. Here, as pictured, Atlanta's Coco Brown, in regards to her sexualization, said, "I did what I had to do in my career, and I don't feel comfortable with my old image promoting what I did." And her longtime friend Mac Breezy told me, as a Black woman in this area, that sex talk means different down here. We will be sexualized regardless, so let's take it back. But we also have the more violent aspects of Southern hip-hop, which many women also participated in through horrorcore, either as solo artists, part of larger rap groups, or as collaborators. Here's a few examples taken from La Chat, Crime Mob, and Princess Loco.
Yeah, we nutty and buggy and ready to fight. How about ya? I'ma throw them things I want to specific twice. See me, I ain't nothing nice. Ain't caught up, it ain't no time to make me like stand up. And that's how I've been like. Like I said, it gon' poppin'. It's how you're acting the fool. I wish I had a way. Grab that feet, max load up, don't bust it and put this bitch in my trunk. Oh, get on me, don't make no noise, you better not fuck up my car. Ain't got no job, I'm down the road, ain't buy no bitch when I'm off. Gotta get that cheese stand on my feet, every day my problems I stop. Nigga, have you ever in your life let a bitch walk dead in your head? Nigga, first yourself, put it up, you make one move and get dead. Motherfucker, try me. How the fucking thing I ain't a motherfucking pill with all these niggas.
In the South, more so than either coast at the time, women were being used as counterparts rather than as accessories. Not to say that the latter didn't occur in the scene. They were able to rap about shooting AKs and watching people bleed, rapping alongside their male counterparts. I believe that it is through the adoption and adaptation of this hyper-masculine and violent language characteristic to the horrorcore genre used by these female rappers in tandem with and in competition with their male counterparts that make this South particularly unique. Whether it be the distinct musical economies and sounds coming out of Atlanta's 6 wards, the Caribbean-influenced club bangers of Miami that traveled far and wide into dance floors across the country, the bleak and dark blues influence of Memphis's iconic lo-fi hip-hop scene, or the slowed down, leaned out sound of Houston that was developed in basement studios and distributed through cassettes. Southern rap shares several distinct characteristics which set them apart from other coasts. The long-standing effects of segregation, Slavery and economic disadvantages poised the South as an underdog, able to take risks with sound and form record labels, collectives, and entire scenes as part of their learned resourcefulness through isolation and their lack of resources. Hold on. Come on. Whether the Southern stereotypes addressed by a letter to the editor in Bay Area-based hip-hop round magazine Murder Dog, they said, "I've been bumping tapes out the South since '93, when the whole nation thought the only thing in Texas was farms and country music." And it speaks to a larger issue of racism, with critics and hip-hop scholarship ignoring this music with such deep roots in Black history as a response to their changing political, social, and economic environments. I find it particularly offensive in classes to try and automatically place these women in terms of succumbing to the male view of their bodies and sexuality, in part due to the racist and classist assumptions that have been used to discredit hip-hop as a valid form of Black expression. Particularly with crunk as a representation of all things depraved and disgusting in the media, speaks to which class and race, as shown in the South, affect how a larger audience understands vulgarity. I don't think that it's a fair assumption to make on all hip-hop, as it strips these women of their own agency. And it also doesn't take into account these regions in which major labels had little to no influence or impact on the scene, such as in the South, which, as I mentioned earlier, rose silently with no major label backing or corporate entities overseeing these artists. It also ignores how unfair it is to impose the status of objectification onto these artists, with it being their own responsibility to define their experiences and success. However, in the midst of the NWAs and the Wu-Tang Clans of the late 80s onward, the South allowed for Gangsta Boo and Trina to state their claims, Princess Loco to show her prowess, and the Princesses and Diamonds of Crime Mob to stand alongside the boys and create club bangers that are still played to this day. In a genre where women are seen as a risk or as a commodity, the South took a chance and gave them a platform, even while in the dark. Here is a clip from Houston rapper Megan Thee Stallion talking about rapping in a male-dominated scene.
And I remember just being in the booth, and this is like around the time when I had first signed to my label. My boy T. Ferris, he had never heard me really rap before. So he came in the room, and I'm rapping, and everybody in the room is like, they knew I could rap, but they had never seen me rap in person. So it made me feel real good to see everybody in the room, especially a room full of men, be like, "Oh shit, she can rap." Like, boy.
To end, I think documentation is a privilege that not everybody is offered, which is why I have spent a large amount of my college career focusing on this research. I think David Banner described it best when he said, when Juvenile was saying "ha" on his record, he wasn't saying that because it was a gimmick. That's how they talk in New Orleans. That's how we talk. By you not acknowledging my music means you telling me fuck me and my people. I don't do hip hop. I do Black music. Before I end, I would like to thank a few people, mainly my family, my friends, all the amazing interview subjects, people who've let me into their homes and businesses while I was down south, all the musicians I've listened to over the years, and some professors such as Kia Gregory, Evan Rapport, and everybody else in the journalism program. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jade. Last but not least, we are going to turn it over to Jay. Everyone, I just want to thank you again before we start with Jay for doing such a terrific job. Following Jay's presentation, we should hopefully have some times for question and answers. So if you would like, please enter into the text box any questions we have, and then I will moderate those after this presentation. It would be great to hear your thoughts, your reflections, your feedback on this diverse set of presentations today. Jay, over to you.
All right, thank you very much. Let me get this set up. Okay. Hey, my name is Jade Tobin. I am a liberal arts major focusing in contemporary musical technology. And today I'm going to be presenting what I currently have of my senior capstone. And what that involves is a good deal of high-end technology and animation and music that I don't have access to. The pandemic was extraordinarily hard on finishing this project, and unfortunately I only have bits and pieces of it. So in the months from now, when I do actually get to go home, I will finish it up, but as of now, it's only in shreds. So, pollution is a seemingly unstoppable issue with few solutions. An aside, I'm an avid birder, and the number of bird populations I've seen disappear at the hands of trash overflow is, honestly, innumerable. In Jamaica Bay, just before one of the many bridges connecting the Rockaways to the mainland, there's a small leaking landfill commissioned by Robert Moses that's been dumping garbage into Brooklyn waterways for decades. The landfill is built on Dead Horse Bay, so named because of the countless horse bones at the bay's bottom from its former days as a horse glue factory, and an otherwise picturesque and thriving landscape. Dead Horse Bay has gained a reputation among local artists as the place to go for salvage glass and interesting turn-of-the-century artifacts. Likewise, the bay is an unlikely haven for exotic, migrant bird species that survivor indigenous populations can't. AI, as much of a threat as pollution is, if not more, is a terrifying concept. The Big Brother made real, teetering on the edge of sentience nature of the field, casts an immense shadow on the more abstract potential things like machine learning possess. Machine learning is a subset of AI, in which machines learn from data sets, usually several thousands of images or audio files or text samples, and learn patterns without human supervision. The results are extremely varied. Facial recognition heavily employs machine learning to make fast, reliable systems used across the moral spectrum to recognize objects, people, faces, expressions, and, as of late, offer a quick and easy solution to mass surveillance and incarceration. So I'm an artist by trade. I don't play any instruments, I don't paint, I barely write, and God knows I can't draw. I do, however, know my way around a laptop, and I adore all things sound and music. When I went to Dead Horse Bay for the first time to shoot a short documentary, I was so incredibly upset by what I saw, I felt an immediate need to do something about it. This was the catalyst for the creation of my piece, Dead Horse Elegy. My piece sonifies garbage. Using a machine learning algorithm I trained myself, I built a program that can identify harmful pollutants in real time and communicate with a nearly infinite set of musical phrases to create a score for a planet choking on industrial waste. Trash, depending on its type and location, informs a musical program that responds through a series of chance-based operations. The musical basis of the work is in Catholic church music, specifically funerary dirges, that I felt best encapsulate the dire situation of pollution while standing as a preemptive elegy for the world should pollution continue to go unchecked. The inner workings of the program use annotated datasets and simulations of population ebbs and surges to make the piece more organic than anything I could ever compose by hand. And as long as it's trash in front of my computer, the score will proceed ad infinitum. My goal for this work is twofold: to create a trash recognition program capable of being used for actual cleanup efforts, and to create a piece of music that gives a voice to an issue more relevant now than ever. My piece is my contribution, I hope, of aid to a global issue, and to appropriate a typically malignant technology for the betterment of the world and all the billions of lives marred by uncontrolled pollution. So what you're seeing right now is a small excerpt from the documentary, and what you're about to see is what informed my piece in general. So now, hopefully you'll be able to hear it. So this is the inspiration for my piece. This is currently the closest thing I have to a working prototype. This is something that I made that uses chance and probability to inform a musical score. And the musical score is something that I recorded entirely by hand from an old organ that was breaking at the time. And so I used this same system to provide the backbone for my composition for my AI project. And as of now, the AI project doesn't have much of a composition system. It's particularly hard to compose a composition on a laptop when originally I intended to do it on a massive desktop. But I have this, and what my AI program does is it takes trash that it sees. For instance, I was going to have, would this be in person? I would have a pile of trash over it, and it would have reacted to the trash in real time. But we do what we have. So my piece reacts to images of trash to a live feed of trash. It reacts to metal, plastic, and glass, and creates a live morphing composition using chance-based operations and something called the game of life, which is the first example of artificial life, not necessarily artificial intelligence and computing, in that it runs on its own and is entirely random and does its own thing entirely. And so some of the larger buzzwords I had in there, ECN, convolutional neural networks, and data sets, and object detection. But what that essentially all is pictures that you have to go through manually, drag a box over and tell what it's looking at. And it will analyze that for either several hours to several days to even a month. In my case, I'd use my laptop, which is why it's currently not working. And it will be able to spit out a good deal of information in real time. So leave something back at the same time. So, in lieu of my actual presentation, in lieu of something that I have pre-made, I instead wrote a statement. So I will read that off. All right. So this doesn't have much to do with my capstone or presentation, but as an artist, I feel like this needs to be said. In the face of truly horrific times, when nothing but the health of those around you seems to matter, and the only way to live life is a day at a time, we have to remind ourselves of our values and remember that, once the inevitable return to normalcy comes, we'll be exactly where we left off before the streets emptied and the hospitals were overrun. Presenting about pollution in the midst of a pandemic is extraordinarily difficult. The skeptic within me is actively trying to convince me it's outright irresponsible. But when the all-clear order is given and we can hug our family and friends again, pollution will still be an incredible and immediate threat, as will apathetic AI, as will everything that used to be so insurmountably scary that we had to momentarily put on hold. Voices need to be heard, and solutions need to be reached. Without art, even in times like these, there's no hope for change. In this moment, we have a responsibility to those around us to keep them safe and healthy. Several months from now, we'll have a responsibility to rehabilitate each other after an unprecedentedly dark moment in history. And with all dark moments, art will prove the only equalizer capable of breaking boundaries and empowering communities to heal fresh, deep wounds. Art has, is now, and always will be the human connection we sorely need for any hope at a brighter future. Speaking on behalf of everyone trapped in a small New York City apartment, hope is all we have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jay. Thanks to all of you. Jay, thank you for writing that final piece to, I think, so poignantly wrap up and connect all of the work together and bring it into this very current moment. Those words will stay with us for a long time as we continue to move into the next phase of this journey together. We have some time left. If there are some questions, thoughts, reflections, comments that people have, please make them. They will get fed to me. I could read them out for the different presenters. We had one that came in earlier for Grace, so I'll let Grace respond to it. The question was, how can we guarantee that the Hudson Yards is even going to be open for 20 years? Grace, can you respond to that? Provide some thoughts?
Hi. So it's actually, I guess, especially now in the face of a global epidemic, Hudson Yards mainly relies on the shopping mall aspect of the development because that's like the public space where people are able to spend money, and like that's what makes the most money outside of residents. And the mall contains very high-end stores, and so there have been a lot of investors involved in keeping erecting Hudson Yards in the first place because it is the most expensive real estate project in U.S. history. So I think that there's good faith that it will stay open for 20 years. The hope is that it's supposed to be similar to Lincoln Center, but right now, who can say if anything is really going to remain the same, especially if they're relying a lot on the income from the retail aspect. I hope it doesn't last for 20 years. I hope that we get it out of here, because I mean, even just aesthetically, it's such an eyesore in the middle of New York. But I think that it's on good faith right now that it'll remain open for the next 20 years at least. But who's to say a homeless shelter wouldn't?
Thank you so much, Grace. Question for Jade. In your journey through the South to study culture, Jade, what was the most important thing? I'm sure you learned so many things, but if you had to sort of like just refine it down to what really stuck with you, what was the most important thing you learned? What would you say that was?
Well, for me, while I was down there, I think one of the most important things I learned was how important community is. So for me, I already come from a DIY punk background. I was a suburban to a city kid, and I suddenly got transported across the country to a rural area with nothing to do except deal with racism, incessant racism for a lot of the time. But through that, I discovered a small pocket of community of DIY punk kids and skaters and stuff, which I embedded myself into. And I kind of became disillusioned when I came back into the city. And I feel like I didn't really get that sort of nourishment I received while I was over there. And then I remember when I was down south, there was something so beautiful and emotional. I remember I was taking a bus ride all the way from Atlanta to Memphis, and I forgot how long that is. Probably about like at least like 5 to 10 hours, which is a large gap, but I forgot how much time it was. I slept for most of it. But I remember looking out and seeing absolutely nothing and feeling some strange feeling within inside me. And it was so weird. Whenever I would like get into an Uber, they were so willing to talk to me about everything. I went to Houston and I visited the grave of Fat Pat, Big Mo, and Big Hawk, who are 3 different legends in the Southern rap scene in Houston. And I was coming back from the gravesite, and this old man visited me. And I also visited DJ Screw's grave. And he was like, "Oh, what were you there for?" And I was explaining to him who I went to see. And his look completely changed. And he started telling me so many beautiful stories about growing up, seeing all the rappers in his neighborhood getting older, and how loyal he is to his neighborhood, which he's lived in for so many years, and still having loyalty to all these different rappers and stuff that he saw grow up within his community. And even when I look on YouTube comments for DJ Screw tapes and stuff, it's just full of, not even this song's cool, it's full of these beautiful stories of people saying, "I remember my dad playing this," or "I remember listening to this with my friends in the schoolyard" and stuff. And I feel like down south, it definitely encompasses that. Southern hospitality is definitely not a myth. And I realize how important it is to have your own self-sufficient communities and support systems when nobody else will give that to you. And I feel like the city is such an individualistic place sometimes that the South kind of helped ground me back into why I got into what I got into with journalism, which is to tell the stories of these people and to find these underrepresented pockets of things. And I think, yeah, that's the most important thing that I learned.
Thank you so much, Jade. And, just to recognize that, this whole concept of home that in many ways we're sort of analyzing from different perspectives, and the lessons, the insights that we've gained through all this work, the fact that we're hearing about it from some version of home or separation from home, I think is just making this whole experience for me that much more powerful at this moment. And to kind of take that thread and expand it, the next question was for Caroline. Caroline, what was it like for you? And if you can talk a little bit more about your process and reporting on your home, and how you did that so intimately and powerfully. If you can just speak to that a little bit, that would be great.
So it mostly started as sort of a journalism endeavor. When I initially began the project, it was inspired a lot by the stories that my grandparents told me when I was a child. I spent a lot of my childhood with my grandparents. I grew up living down the street from them, definitely, in a very tight-knit rural community. And my grandfather would tell me stories about his parents working in the cotton mills and how they had to drop out of school at an early age. And my grandmother's family has a long history in the peanut industry. So they both in different ways have different backgrounds to agriculture in the land. So I sort of started with that sort of idea and started documenting the landscape. But then I eventually interviewed them and discussed more of their family backgrounds, more of how religion and being in the Bible Belt region of the United States played a role in how they understood their particular circumstances growing up. Everything from food, culture, obviously, racism, and aspects of white supremacy that unfortunately are embedded within the region. And really started there. And then I began to document places from my grandparents' childhoods, their childhood homes, parts of my childhood. For example, like the image of the concrete with my name drawn in it, which I did in my grandparents' driveway as a kid. And just started documenting the things in which they had told me while I was interviewing them.
Thank you so much, Caroline, for that insight into the work. And again, if I can just really encourage everyone to seek out the book itself and to really take time and sit with those images. I think it really deserves that time. We got, I think a great quick shot of it. But thank you for those insights, and please do follow up and continue to give the work what's due. There's a general question, for anyone who wants to jump on. If I can just make sure I have the right, here it is. Still learning to use Zoom myself after all these days. So someone asked, curious to learn more from each or any of the presenters regarding the explicit connection of their project to the topic of home and the implications for any of you. If anyone would like to speak, I guess, a little bit more to how their work connected really to this theme of home and what implications it had for you or for the work that you do.
I'll talk. I think for me, it was very interesting. And I get this a lot. Every time I talk about and drone on about my research, I always have people come up to me. It's even when I was down south and we're like, oh, so where from down south are you? And I'm like, nowhere. And they're like, okay, where are you from? And I'm like, suburban New Jersey. And it's so weird. And for me, home means so many different things. And I've never really explicitly felt like New Jersey was my home, but rather I found home in different ways. And I think it's especially interesting as a marginalized person. I am a woman of color. I'm a queer woman. And in both of those things, through the separation through oppressive immigration policies to even just the rejection and the overall homophobic society that we live in, a lot of your families are chosen, a lot of your homes are chosen. And for me, I never really felt more so that like a physical place was home, but more so certain people or certain things were home to me. And in this case, I found a lot of validation and home within this music. And it's something that I found a lot through a lot of the research that I've done is home doesn't always mean your city or your state. It could mean simply ideals or music that you love. And that's one thing that I realized, or those things can enhance what home means. Otherwise, it's simply just a place. And for me, I feel like I have found a home through these small pockets of culture that I have immersed myself in, whether it be hardcore punk or Southern rap and everything. And these people have been so open and honest with me. And I feel like that's more valuable than, or just as valuable than if I lived down there my whole entire life or something.
I love the way you're dislocating home from a physical place into concepts and ideas and meetings and functions. Carolyn, I'll let you quickly respond. And then there was a question for Emily that I'd like to get to next. So Caroline and then Emily.
Yeah, just to add on to that, like I think the idea of home is especially important right now, considering what's going on with COVID-19, because a lot of us who decided to stay in New York, who are not from here, had to deal with this central question of like to stay or to leave. And when I left Georgia to study in school here, I was faced with that same question, to stay or to leave. But I think it drives home the point even more that even though you might not be in that location where home is and where you were born and raised, you still have that connection to home and to that place and to the people and culture, kind of like how Jade was saying.
Yeah, that's great. Emily, I have a question that came for you. You mentioned that your project was in part inspired by recognizing gentrification from Miami. Do you see yourself expanding this work into the future, into a multi-sited project in the future? And I just want to add to that we got a nice comment, which is exactly how I feel. Such poise, intensity, and deeply serious research. Clearly, you've all done these kinds of presentations for years. How would you grow your projects? And so I guess, we can sort of take that and fold that question first to you, Emily. How would you grow your project given the sort of connections that you're making between Miami and Brooklyn and just the way and taking what you've learned from your research?
Yeah, well, I definitely think all of these questions definitely go hand in hand. Hi, Lee. Absolutely. I see myself doing a multi-sided project in the future. And sort of coming back to this idea of connecting home. I mean, for me, it was an instant connection. I actually didn't know where I would live yet when I first got to New York. And I mean, I know there's definitely a few Latinx communities in the 5 boroughs, but I didn't see myself I didn't know rather that I would live in Bushwick. So it was just really interesting coming straight from Miami and then moving back into a Spanish speaking neighborhood. I didn't expect that for my first year in college, but I loved it. And I loved that homey feeling. And right away, I just wanted to jump on that and tell stories and learn more about it. And in regards to Miami, absolutely. I feel such a strong connection with Miami and where I'm from, and specifically the Cuban American community, because, both my parents are Cuban, my whole family's Cuban. And there's just so many more stories. I mean, we know the stories from the 50s and 60s and everything, but there's so much more on top of that. There's just more younger people coming from Cuba. And then there's kind of a trade system going on with people coming to Miami and supporting people in Cuba and vice versa. So that's really interesting me a lot, and just Cuban culture in general, and also all of the Caribbean cultures in Miami, but that community specifically, because that door has always been open in my life. I feel like I would absolutely go home and do some more research on that. So yeah.
That's great. And even just thinking about homes plural in the way you're taking lenses from Miami, bringing it to your understanding and experience of Brooklyn, and now bringing that lens back to rethinking about places like Miami, and that sort of bi-directional, conversation is so interesting. Just to bring in more voices, Grace and Oliver, how would you guys, and Jay, how would you, with the few minutes we have left, how would you expand your projects going forward?
I think for my project, there's a lot of opportunities in the world, but also just in the country, of these sort of large metropolitan regions that have really over any sort of political boundaries. And I think that this project could really operate as a template and could be applied to a lot of these different areas. And I think that could be really the way it could move forward. Areas like the DC metropolitan area, Chicago metropolitan area, and even some in my home state of Maine, where there's areas where cities really don't often actually follow political boundaries. They tend to spill over into other places. And I think, using this as the template going forward, you could really see a lot of possibility in a lot of places that are currently considered stagnant or in decline.
Great. Grace, how about Grace, Jay, and then we'll wrap up.
So since I finished this version of my documentary, I've actually already done a lot of more research. I've been fortunate enough to meet the associate curator of the Highline Art Collection, And my opinion on the Highline Art Collection has actually shifted so much since I was able to talk to her about it. It's really interesting because the Highline actually goes directly into Hudson Yards. So I really assumed that there was a lot of partnership between these two locations. And there is to an extent, but from the curator's perspective, they are also seeing a lot of problems with Hudson Yards and the way that it has turned art into such a commodity, or only views art as such a commodity. And I have also found out in the same breath that so in New York City, in order to build up a certain amount, you have to also offer public space for people to occupy if your building is a certain height. And these are called privately owned public spaces, or POPs. Hudson Yards actually does not meet the quota for the amount of POPs that they have to have. So they have a temporary deal with the Highline right now, where part of the Highline is considered Hudson Yards because it's a public area, which it's not Hudson Yards. I don't know how that can possibly be legal. I'd like to find out more about that. It's supposed to only be until they finish developing the rest of the project, but they don't seem to be offering any other resolutions to the POPs issue. And then on top of that, I would really love to do more research on what related companies owes to Harlem specifically, because the whole funding of the project came from implementing Harlem in the zoning for Hudson Yards. And I'm unclear how they were able to do that if they don't have to do any development in Harlem. And if they do have to do development in Harlem, I'd like to see what that looks like, what that is, what they're planning on doing there. So I have a lot more research to do, and I'm eager to find out more and to find the answers to my questions regarding this whole project.
Thank you, Grace. And I'm sure I can speak on all of our behalf. They'll be following your research and investigations very, very closely. Jay, can you bring us all together?
Sure. I believe part of the question that was asked was, how would you proceed with it? And first I'd have to finish mine. So first things first would be, as soon as I can leave this apartment, I would go home, do as much as I possibly can, as quickly as I can, and get it all done. I would really love to have something operating, but in the more abstract sense, half of my project was built with the intent to actually do something that could help. So the thought behind my process of building a trash detection algorithm would be to significantly speed up the work and the job of anyone who's working in like a trash separation facility, just to make life easier for them, or to make things easier in general for them. I'm not entirely sure. It was just sort of a fun way for me to justify using AI, which I never really felt too comfortable about. But in general, more abstractly, I would love to take AI and apply it to things like generating music, and to things like generating images, and to things like making art in general, where I just am very loosely associated with it, and I have something that works with me and works for me. But that's very far beyond my pay grade right now. So first, I'm just going to stick to finishing my project when I can.
I can make my students big screens. My daughter Harper thought she would join us for the closing remarks. Harper, these are my students. They worked so hard this semester on their class projects. And so now we're just getting ready to thank them and to say goodbye to everyone. Thank you.
I don't want to say goodbye.
Okay, well, maybe we can just, I don't want to say goodbye either, but they have other stuff that they have to do.
I want us to be big screen.
I know. We want to make all of you really big screens so we can see you closer. Maybe one day we'll all see each other again in person. For now,
can I go to Papa's class?
When can you come to my class? Hopefully again soon. And bye, everyone. Thank you so much. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you for all of your hard work.